Good afternoon and welcome to this webinar, How to Turn Your AI BI into Reality. This event is brought to you by ENR and sponsored by LoadSpring Solutions. Hi, I'm Scott Seltz, publisher of ENR, and your moderator for today's presentation, and thank you for joining us. Although AI BI is on almost every AEC organization's to-do list, knowing where to start, let alone how to leverage data wranglers, enterprise architects, data scientists, and AI experts can seem like an unattainable goal. Today's webinar will explore how identifying key business questions and creating the infrastructure necessary are the foundational step of leveraging your data. A panel of experts will discuss their best practices and how they overcame challenges to leverage AI BI to increase ROI. So let's get started with our discussion. Joining me are Rashaad Sader, Chief Technology Officer at Cumming, and Dean Edmundson, Chief Strategy Officer at LoadSpring Solutions. Our speakers will present, and then I'll rejoin them to moderate questions from you, so be sure to submit them in the Q&A section during the presentation. Now, I'm going to hand things over to Dean.
Thanks, Scott. Can you hear me okay?
Loud and clear.
Excellent. All right. Thanks, everyone, for taking time out of your day to join us. We really appreciate it. What Rashaad and I'd like to do is walk you through a process today, and it is a multi-step process on how we're helping organizations transform their AI BI into reality. But before we get started into the details as to what this multi-step process looks like, I thought it would be interesting to learn a little bit about you guys, the audience, to figure out where you're from, and give you guys a sense of the different types of organizations that are participating today. So if you could take a second and complete this poll. What type of company do you work for? AEC firm, owner, agency, consultant, student? We're going to run these polls throughout today's session to make this as interactive as possible. It's fun for you guys to understand who your peers are on the call. It's fun for us to understand who the audience is. We have a sneaky suspicion that AEC firm might be high, but we'll see in a minute here how this plays out. So I'm going to share the beginning of the results here, so that you guys can all see what the breakdown looks like. It looks like I was wrong. It looks like AEC firm is the second most prominent organization, with owner-operators coming in third, consultants second, and we have one student online. So kind of a little bit of what we expected, but much stronger on the consultant side. As is to be expected for this topic, actually, now that you think about it a little bit. This is a transformational type of discussion that we're going to have today. Organizations are challenged with how do they go from status quo to a fully adopted AI, BI, ML type solution. So I can imagine that there is a lot of consulting going around in the industry today. So let's get started here with the core of the presentation. Part of why we're focused on this as an organization, and LoadSpring's been in the business of helping customers transition to the cloud for the last 21 years. Over the period of 21 years, we have identified across all of our customers a challenge. And the challenge is, how do we get to good data so that we can make really smart, intelligent, go-forward decisions? And while we're hosting the data, we are now putting on top of that different capabilities to allow you to rationalize your data into good data, into bad data, into role-based data, so that you can actually leverage the right AI, BI, ML tools on top of that, and with confidence, make sure that you have the right data and the right insights to make decisions to go forward. As you can see, most organizations don't have this today. You can see the cost of bad data. 50% of the users are copying mundane tasks into the system. 20 to 30% of operating expenses are because of bad data. And data scientists spend 60% of their time today just cleaning up the data. So this is a real problem. You guys are here because it's a problem. We're here to fix the problem and help give you some insights as to directions you can possibly begin turning your organization to ameliorate these issues. Just to put another big number on top of how much bad data costs, just the US market, it's $3 trillion per year per IBM. So again, big problem. One of our experiences, and we collect all this data across hundreds of thousands of users, hundreds of customers globally, is that we see across our customer base at least a 40% project data growth per year. So within the systems that we're hosting today, project management systems, we see 40% growth per year, and approximately 64% of the project data is dirty. Now, what does the dirty data mean? Well, we're going to get into that in a moment here and explain how we put filters in place to identify clean data versus dirty data. But you can imagine that with 64% of the data being dirty, it becomes really difficult for an organization to go from, we have data, we have applications, we're collecting all of this data, we're going to integrate those applications, and on top of that, we're going to put an AI BI solution, and that's going to give us the ability to prognosticate, or to look in the rearview mirror to see what's happened and to prognosticate what is going to happen. As much as organizations want to accomplish this, they can't today because of the fact that 64% of the project data is dirty. So I'd like to jump into another poll to help us understand what the challenges are that you're facing in your AI BI adoption. So if you could take a moment and answer these couple questions, then we'll hone in on some of the results of the poll and share our insights into best practices and how we are helping organizations overcome some of these challenges. As I have a little insight into how you're responding to these. You guys don't see this now, but it's interesting. The responses, if I would have thought about this a little bit more in advance, I would have tried to force rank these because it's definitely one is what I thought one would be. It is the number one. And here, let me share the results with you guys so you can see it. Business objectives not clearly understood. I definitely thought that would be number one. Number three, understanding what data and application rationalization is required. That would have been, if we force rank these, are number two. And AI BI apps in place, but data continues to be suspect, I would have ranked as number three. The fourth one, we've been working on this for years with limited results. So, the business objectives not clearly understood. This is part of the partnership that LoadSpring has with Cumming. Part of our goal is to share with you this multi-phased approach to how you solve the AI BI challenge, and understanding the business objectives, knowing what KPIs, where those KPIs exist, the source data, and then what you need as an organization to make go, no-go decisions can be challenging from organization to organization. What we're doing within LoadSpring is we're building an 80-20 type of approach to this, where we're taking all the best-in-class, best practices from what we see and working with Cumming as well as your organization and others to identify what are the must-haves, what are the must-have data sets, what are the must-have cleaning filters to make sure that your data is coming in and it's crystal clear so that you can make those decisions. And that takes a little bit of effort because we do need to understand very clearly your business objectives, but we also give you some training wheels to suggest what those business objectives are based on best practices that we've identified working across hundreds of thousands of users globally. So let's jump into the process now. So as far as, how do you transition? How do you turn your AI BI into reality? We have identified a 6-step process within LoadSpring. The first is identifying the business objectives, of course. The second is extracting the data. Third is cleaning the data. Make sure that we have filters in place that the data that you're actually analyzing with whatever tool of choice you choose is clean data, and then you analyze that, and the results give you a sense of confidence that you are looking through a very clear rearview mirror, or you're looking through a very clear dashboard to say this is the direction our organization should go, because we've removed all the dirty data, we've removed the bias that's in the data, and now we can build go-to-market strategies based on past experiences that we as an organization feel comfortable in. This process does not happen by any stretch overnight. We spend a lot of time working with our customers and with Cumming to understand the business objectives. But then we've put a really clean mechanism process in place to do the extract, clean, and build part of this. This is something that's very unique to LoadSpring. We've built this within our engineering development team so that we can take an application, call it P6, Ecosys, an estimating application, and we have predetermined filters that we put in place to help you as the customer only extract the clean data from that. So once you have that clean data in a data pond, then you can build upon that and begin to correlate different data sets to look at your data in the way that it makes sense for your business. What that looks like is something like this. So we identify the source data, and we work with you to understand where this source data might be sitting. We put a filter in place. In this case, it has P6 databases. So there's 3 different databases. We put filters on these databases to only extract the clean data. And then once the clean data is extracted, it's put into a data lake so that you can then leverage that data across multiple data sets, i.e. scheduled data with cost data and estimating data. And you can begin to create predictive analytics. You're going to obviously have project stats where you're going to be able to look at the success of your organization and how well you've done in the past with confidence. And I will continue to say with confidence because the clean data gives you that. But you're also going to be able to go forward and say, based on what we've done in the past, and we know that this is relevant data, relevant projects that we created, how do we go forward and how do we improve upon these best practices with different AI BI tools? So this whole process, and the other thing that I'll add to this, is going from data source to business intelligence are those 6 steps. That's a change management effort for any organization to get into. And while we're very versed at the technology behind this and what it takes to pull ETL your data into a clean data lake and give you the capabilities to layer on top of that your right application to make go forward decisions, that all sounds nice and easy, but it is change, and there's a lot of change. And what we are all also well versed in is how do we help customers navigate that change management field, if you will, or valley, because sometimes people get into the valley of despair and they're not sure and they just want to go back to their old ad hoc solutions. And Rashaad will talk more about this. And our job is to help you as an organization stay away from the ad hoc solutions and move forward with this clean SOP compliant process that allows the organization now to scale and to adopt a new way forward that impacts you as a business, and it creates a competitive moat that completely differentiates you from your peers in the marketplace. We understand that, and we're very collaborative with our customers. We engage with senior management and the pace setters, if you will, within the organizations to help adopt these new solutions, these new capabilities, because adoption is critical in any change management exercise, as we all know. So the other thing that I wanted to share with you is the actual filtration, an example of the filtration process. I think this is really cool. It's a lot of detail here, but it's really cool when you look at it from the perspective of there are 6 customers here, A through F. These are all real customers. all these customers had a differing amount of projects in their system, from 286 to 1,727. In each case, not all of these projects were good projects. Some of them had extraneous data in them. Some of them were baseline projects. Some of them were projects from other organizations with just WBS elements in it to support a master schedule. Some of them had zero data count. In essence, many of the projects that were in these systems were bad data. And what you see at the bottom there, the second row from the bottom, is total filtered usable projects. So in A, they had 286 projects in the system. Only 76 of those projects, or 27%, were actually usable. And this is the first step for us to help any organization transition. First, LoadSpring step. The actual first step is understanding the business objectives. Once we understand the business objectives, the source data, it's all about how do we extract, clean, and then build on that data. And the first step is putting these filters in place so that you, with confidence, can go back and say to the broader organization, this is what we actually did. These were the real results of our projects in the past. Therefore, our projects in the future, minus any bias, can look like this if we do X, Y, and Z. Very interesting process for us. We as an organization have developed a lot of best practices around putting these filters in place for different applications, because each application has its own set of data sets that are common or bad, if you will. And we have to segregate the common data sets, which are good, from the bad data sets. And that's the first step. And then what we're doing beyond that is we're helping organizations understand where they actually sit from a benchmarking standpoint. For example, when we do, in this case, when we took the 6 customers and we put them through this filtration process, we could easily identify that customer C was a top quartile customer. They have very solid SOP compliance. They still have room for improvement, for sure, but they're well ahead of their peers from SOP compliance with how they set up projects, how they establish those, where they put the baselines, if they archive those out, and how they're segregated from the core set of project data, which is going to influence the direction of the organization. Mid quartile and bottom quartile obviously need quite a bit of room or have quite a bit of room for improvement. So we're working with them to identify what that looks like in that whole change management process that I talked about earlier. So with that, what I'd like to do again, as I promised earlier, we have a number of polls. I'd like to ask you to please force rank how clean you believe your project data is. Tough question to answer, we recognize. It's many times when we present this data back to our customers, we present it back with a furrowed brow, not our brow being furrowed, but theirs, because they don't like to hear that their data is as dirty as it is. And some people recognize that is the reason why we're there, and we're going to help them clean it up. But it's always interesting to see the responses and hear from the different players, whether they're a line of business or IT, as to why the data could be as dirty as it is. So let me share the results here. Cleans. So we have 13% feel that they're pretty clean. I thought that would be the lowest, and we lined up pretty well there. 50 to 74%, or I'm sorry, 32% think that they're 50 to 74% clean. And then 30% of the respondents think that they're somewhere between 25 and 49. And then there's another 24% that feel that only 25 or less than 25% of their data is clean. So, in essence, it's a very small percentage of all the attendees here today. We have hundreds of people on the call today. Very small percentage of those hundreds of people feel like they're in a good position of having clean data. So this is a real problem, something that we put best practices in place for. And as I hand this off to Rashaad and he creates the art of possibility for you, I think you'll begin to put all of these pieces together to understand how LoadSpring and an organization like Cumming can come together to help you accelerate your time frame from going from current data set to a very clean AI BI environment and turning that into reality. So with that, what I'd like to do now is introduce you to Rashaad. Again, we've been working with Rashaad and his team since late last year, and we're very encouraged about the capabilities that they bring to market. They're an exciting organization to work with, and they're the tip of the spear when it comes to working direct with the customer to understand what the customer's business process and needs are, and helping us facilitate tools like our extraction tool, where we can clean up the data for customers. So with that, let me hand it over to you, Rashaad.
Thanks a lot, Dean. Pretty excited to be here today because I think we've really found a unique opportunity to change the way things are done in projects and really provide the horsepower everyone's been looking for. For those of you on the call who haven't met Cumming Corporation in the past, just a little bit about us. We're 36 offices worldwide, and we have an international presence, mostly in the United States and the United Kingdom. We're leading experts primarily in the area of project management and cost consultancy. And some of the projects that I think we're quite proud of is the Four Seasons Hotel and Condo in New York. This is interesting because we represented one of the major lenders on this particular project, both at the early stage development and then throughout the life cycle of the project. Suffice it to say, relevant to this conversation, significant amount of reporting required to deliver the value to that particular customer. Another client we've been very proud of is our work with Facebook. We've been working with them since 2013, in particular their Menlo Park office back in the early days. Really cool building. Would love to talk to you more about it. But our role with Facebook has expanded substantially since that time, and now we're helping them across their regional endeavors. And then across the pond in the UK with Langham London, this is an example of one of our long-term relationships that we've established in the UK market. Langham is part of a high-profile hotel chains, and we've helped them through significant upgrades and expansions and refurbishments on this project, primarily in the project management and cost consultancy areas. You know, one of the questions Dean had asked at the beginning was, what's the biggest challenge with AI and BI adoption? And one of the responses that got a lot of traction was the area of business objectives not being clearly understood. And I think a big part of that is really understanding the problem. As consultants, we kind of see ourselves as the gray matter experts or human engines that really provide what's possible in projects. And the reason we think there's been this challenge of understanding business objectives is the resources that make up a project are typically people and tools. And traditionally, that people and tools have been very disparate resources and didn't really overlap. My Excel sheet didn't really supplement people. My typewriter or word processor or calculator and so forth, they were really two separate resources. But today, those resources are coming together and starting to overlap. And the question for consultants like us is, how do we create more value in that intersection? And not just create the value, but extract the value of the intersection for our customers. And why is that important? Well, if we think about what's happened on projects and the role that we provide as consultants, our role in providing insight is really expanding. While we once had to operate in a very reactive environment, one where we received data, say from 2-3 weeks ago, and then had to decide how to react as project managers to cure that issue, we're entering a world of proactive management, where we're now getting data in real time. Now, project management is not just about reading data. It's about how do you lead people to really get the best out of teams. And when we think about proactive data or real-time data, we think it very similar to, say, coaching a basketball team. When you're coaching a basketball team, you're watching a game in real time, and you're deciding on when's the right time to intervene, maybe call a timeout and realign your team. You may see bad issues happening, but it's not the right time to do something, or you may see good issues happening and want to see how that plays out before making any further changes. That's very different than coaching from videotape for previous games you've played, which is very much like the reactive situation we've been in the AEC environment. And of course, we're all looking forward to the area of predictive environment, but that too changes what project management should mean in a predictive environment. I like to consider it more like the departure lane warnings you get in your car. If you buy a new car and your car tells you that you're veering outside the line, should you intervene? Or what's the right course of action? Well, you as the driver or you as the project leader need to understand where the prediction's coming from, what it's telling you and the right way to react. So that brings us to this question of, well, in the proactive world, why is data visualization so important today? Well, as Dean explained, first, collecting the clean data is really required before we even talk about data visualization. It's really the first step in order for us to be able not just be able to visualize our data and make quality decisions on what's happening in real time, but also getting towards predictive information in the future. The second is understanding what's happening in the world around us when it comes to data. Our clients may not be all asking for data visualization today, but we're getting used to a world that has real-time information in front of us. I no longer wonder where my taxi cab is. I no longer wonder where my pizza is. And the last time I dealt with a courier service that didn't have real-time tracking of packages, I found it very frustrating. So our belief is our human society is evolving to where real-time information is the norm and the expected, and everyone's going to expect it on their projects as time goes on. So before we go any further, perhaps I can take a page out of Dean's book and ask a little poll here. How do you execute against project visualization? If you could take a minute to submit your answers. Wow, so luckily for myself and Dean, we get to see the numbers sort of come in real time. Right now it's going along as expected, especially considering a large part of the group was from consultants and AEC firms. So while there's still some numbers coming in, I'll move over to give you the results. You can see for the most part, everybody has come back, or the majority has come back with 62% saying it's a manual ad hoc process. And this is not surprising. I think that's the big reason why a lot of people are here. 27% do have an automated process where they're getting reports automatic from role and region. And the remaining 10%, well, they're really just contracting that work out. So considering, many people said it was a manual ad hoc process, not many of you would be surprised to find an Excel sheet like this that's actually tracking your project growth. But I believe many of you would be surprised to find out that this tracking sheet came from a few years ago from a very large internet company, internet giant, frankly, that we all know. Fast forward to where they are today, and some of the services we're able to provide them now with proper dashboarding is, what I'm showing here is one of our latest dashboards that we've created for them showing shipping center progress status. Just some of the salient features you can get from doing this is your ability to now see who actually created the report, rather than having to drive through multiple emails to find out who the originator was when you have a question. Being able to easily filter to be able to zero in onto exactly what you want to see, or being able to see what drill down by your program sites by region, allowing the reader or the team now to become more productive and better understand their data in ways that's more profound to them. Another area to look at is, say, in the case of labor hours and dashboards. Now, in the top right corner, our system's automatically giving some prediction on what future labor hours is going to be using statistics from previous weeks. But one of the really cool thing is the ability to pull data from different sources. So here you see an example of data being pulled from Procore and Site Tracks, showing the number of renovation projects by site, the safety incidents by site, and the total approximate labor hours. This really frees our team to think about what's happening in terms of labor hours, number of projects, and safety in a way that would have been very difficult before, because they'd have to pull multiple reports together on their own to be able to show that information. Another way to look at it, though, is how does data visualization change the way you see things altogether, and can it make our project leaders more productive? This is an example of showing project information geographically. And it frees up the user now to be able to start thinking about what's happening in terms of region perspective rather than a flat Excel sheet. The reason that's important is you may see numbers happening here that allows you to think about places you can go to get resources for areas that are going to be expanding in other parts of the geography. Alternatively, in the case here where we're looking at labor hours, you may be concerned about a concentration of the number of projects in one labor region against labor availability in that particular region. The idea is to prompt project managers or project leaders with ideas of problems that may occur to them so they can start steering the ship well before it comes even close to an iceberg. Now, one of the key things for most projects is tracking KPIs. And KPI tracking is something we all do on most projects, but unfortunately, it's typically done very reactively. And that's because KPIs tend to come from very different sources, and it takes a while to put them all together. Here's an example of a KPI report where the data source comes from very different programs like eBuilder or Primavera or SiteTracks, for example. Once again, this really allows our PMs to start thinking more about how and when to intervene, as opposed to spending more time just trying to collect the data so they can get a fix of where they are. But by that time, they haven't really had a chance to strategize about how best to solve a problem. Once again, we think data dashboarding, the way it's done here, changes the behavior of how projects are carried, and very similar to providing real-time coaching to a basketball team on the court. So, of course, the question everybody has is, the dashboards are nice and we understand the outputs, but the intent of this talk was to really understand how do we get there. And I think the best way to do that is to go back to what Dina talked about. Those 6 steps of developing the business objectives, then extracting the data, cleaning the data, and then building your analysis and taking intelligent decisions on those projects. Well, we see our side in Cumming as providing that upfront business objective help. We're really good at understanding what the client's needs are. For the most part, we work inside the client's organization and act as client's PMs. More importantly, we also understand the right place to go to get the right source data and the source data that is relevant for that particular project, program, or initiative that's being done by a company. And I hope I've demonstrated to you that we're really good at understanding the analysis that are required and developing the right dashboarding tools. Every bespoke project or every platform or program-based initiative has different reporting needs that really need to speak to the overall business drivers and objectives. But the area that we've struggled with in the consulting world is this area in the middle, this area of extracting, cleaning, and building data. And this is where it's been exciting to work with LoadSpring using their Project Intel platform to develop these extraction and cleaning methods and take care of that technology difficulty that we had trouble doing ourselves. And of course, once you started collecting your data that's quite clean, you can now start working towards developing, in the initial phase, shallow machine learning models to be able to help make those predictions very similar to, say, lane avoidance, lane departure warnings that we get in cars today, to help our teams leverage the knowledge of the entire organization rather than just their extraction of knowledge onto their projects. So once again, before I turn it over to Scott, we wouldn't mind asking you another survey question and understanding what your key takeaways were from today's presentation. So if you wouldn't mind taking a moment to answer the survey here. So the numbers are coming in. I'll just give a few more minutes. Yeah, a little surprised by some of the numbers, but this is really interesting. So in the interest of time, I'm going to move over here to show you the results. About 37% of everybody found that there are best-in-class steps to successfully deploy AI BI strategies, and you're not alone in the journey, and we're happy you see that. It's true, yes, many peers are struggling with a similar process and challenges, and I think Dean and his team have done a great job to help us all get out of what we would call that valley of despair of trying to deal with AI, BI in our projects. And then finally, the insight into business requirements and KPIs has to be ground zero. I would have thought that would have been a little bit higher because I too believe that's the key requirement to be able to get into to understand what makes sense for your particular project and program. And so now I'll pass it over to Scott, who will take us into Q&A. Scott?
Thank you, Rashaad. That was a great presentation. So I actually, before we get to the Q&A, and I'm going to encourage our listeners to provide their questions, enter it in the Ask the Question box and send them in. There were several questions that occurred to me during both of your presentations. So if you don't mind, I'd like to field those to you. The first question that occurred to me is, how do our viewers get access to some of the best practices that you've developed to guide their AI BI initiative?
We're going to give Rashaad and myself's contact information, and you're more than welcome to reach out directly to us, or you're welcome to go through the website. Our website will also give you, and if you just plug in and say that you'd like to talk to us or call me direct, I'd be happy to put you in touch with the right people on our side. Rashaad and his team and our team are working collaboratively on this. So it really doesn't matter if you start with him or you start with myself. We together will help you solve the problem and help you understand what some of these best practices look like once we understand a little bit about your organization.
Great, thank you. Another question. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say I couldn't say it better, Dean. Thanks.
How many customers are currently that you're helping to migrate to a better AI BI world?
So there's a post-event survey on the screen right now. Is that supposed to be there? Just FYI.
Yeah, they can take the survey or just exit out.
Okay, all right. How many customers are we working with today? So that's a really interesting question. Every single customer that I talk to, every one of our customers has this challenge, has this problem. We have a backlog of customers that we're working with today. There's probably around 20 that we're working on right now who want us to help them with this solution. And we have active engagements with those organizations as we speak.
Great. Go ahead.
I was going to say on our side, we have a substantial amount. The actual number of customers on the data analytics side has been growing substantially. I don't have the exact number on me. Our interactions with our clients tend to be a little bit different because they're looking to us to help them understand what their core problem is and how to build their teams and solve their issues. Data analytics becomes a big part of that. So it's almost as if it's really almost cut into almost every one of our clients. Bearing in mind, they're all asking things slightly differently with different outcomes and expectations.
Great. Another question occurred to me from both of your perspectives. How long does it typically take to get clean project data so a user can be confident in their historical project statistics?
So let's tag team this one, Rashaad. Anecdotally, as I mentioned, we're working with a number of customers on this. If we pick a application to get that application set up, the filtering system set up, understand your business case, use cases, filters set up, everything aligned, we're talking about somewhere between 2 to 3 months to have the system in place so that you're actually beginning to benefit from it, see it, and then you're adding to it. And that's normally the second phase of this, is getting one system set up and then understanding where the source data is never enough. It's multiple systems. Now we have sets of data that we want to pull into this clean data lake, if you will. And then that just cascades into, a bigger, longer term project. But near term, you're able to get real clean data within a couple months to begin to make go, no-go decisions on how you want to move that forward.
Yeah, no need to tag team, Dean. I think you got that perfectly there.
So another question for both of you. Are you implementing machine learning with any of your customers? And if so, what does that look like?
We are implementing the vision of machine learning. We're not to the phase of machine learning, because as I walked everyone through that process, that six-step process earlier, the first phase of that is collecting project stats. It's making sure that you have the right information, it's clean information from the right source data, and then you have a good view of historically where you've been. Then once you've done that, putting the AI, BI, ML solution on top of that to be able to screen all of that data, take bias out of that data, is the next step. And that's probably around a 12-month process to get to the ML component of it. So we're thinking about that. We're engaged in that. We're putting in our filtration system and our capabilities ML components to it, but we're not that far along with our customers at the moment to actually say we've turned it on and it's working. Because as I mentioned, this is a change management effort, and there are a lot of things that need to happen, i.e. adoption of the solution, compliance of the solution, and then full integration and interoperability across multiple data sets to say, okay, this is great data. We want to move forward with this data. Now let's take the bias out of it and put an ML component to it so that we can say with confidence going forward that this is how projects should be executed.
Great. A viewer is asking, where does data for labor hours come from, and how do we ensure consistency in data that is provided?
So that's a good example of where we work very closely with the customer at the beginning to determine, first of all, where the data sources should be. Those type of data sources are really dependent upon a particular project. And so it's not a one-size-fits-all, which is once again why it's been great working with Dean and their team, because they're able to ingest data from those sources as required. And the second part of that question, Scott, was what?
Oh, I'm sorry, I pushed it out. Hold on. How do you ensure consistency in data that is provided?
So we work with our clients at an early stage to help lay out what some of that reporting structure needs to look like, so there is some consistency. And really it speaks to what Dean was talking about in that six-step process. It's really that upfront work of understanding the business objectives and then laying some frameworks out so that information can be used accordingly.
Yeah, the other piece that I'd add to this is, and we didn't talk about it during the initial part of our discussion, is that there's always a rationalization going on. And whenever I say rationalization, I'm talking about there's rationalization of the infrastructure, there's rationalization of the users, there's rationalization of the apps, and there's rationalization of the data to make sure that the data is clean and it's persona based. And so when you ask about the consistency of the labor hour data could come from time and attendance. It could come from input into, some HR system. It could come from a myriad of applications. And how do we make that consistent? Well, we rationalize that. We go through this process with an organization to understand where is the data coming from, which data sets should be feeding the actual schedule to say, here's how many hours should be applied to the schedule. And then once that's done, we make sure that there's an SOP written around that and we're complying to it, because that's what's forcing everyone's hand to make sure that the data is correct and clean and coming from the right source.
Great. Another viewer is asking a little bit more of a technical question. How do you manage to connect to live data to any and all systems? Do you build APIs, connectors for it?
Oh yeah, good question. So we, really good question. So it doesn't, the data that comes in through the Project Intel solution, that's how we rationalize the data, clean the data, and size it appropriately for the different roles. That data can reside anywhere. You determine the deployment strategy, whether it's in another cloud, whether it's on premise. It doesn't matter to us. We'll connect to it through VPNs, APIs, web services, whatever we need to do to extract that data into our system in a secure manner so that you can then leverage it across all those other applications. The big part of that question is there is no organization that we walk into who has identified one deployment strategy, i.e. all their data is located in one location. It's all over the place. So we have to have tentacles, and we do, to be able to pull that data into our solution with one caveat. If you have a SaaS solution and that SaaS solution doesn't provide you access to the data, that's something that, that's a challenge that you as the customer should always be considering when you're identifying SaaS solutions. One, does it have parity of my client server or web-based solutions, functional parity? Two, do I have access to that data? Because we can't just go in and open that up if the ISV that provided that solution doesn't provide access to the data.
The same viewer actually now is asking the question of what's your approach to a new system you may encounter that doesn't have a live connector capability within a BI tool?
Can you say that again, Scott?
Yes. So he's asking, what's your approach to a new system you may encounter that doesn't have live connector capability within a BI tool?
I'll have to table that because there's a lot. There are questions that I have to that question, and I don't want to go off and pontificate on what I think the question really is.
Very good. Another viewer is asking, what principles are you using to forecast hours and cost? Earned value management, ad hoc logic specific to client?
Rashaad, do you want to take that?
Yeah, so in our case, it's ad hoc logic specific to the client. And I think that's needed just because each client's quite different with different drivers and the way they want to manage their work.
Very good. Dean, I think this is your question. Does LoadSpring offer a platform to create our own dashboards, or do they offer a consulting service of creating dashboards?
Does LoadSpring? So we do we do both of those things. So LoadSpring we have what we call LoadSpring Insight. So we have a dashboard where we can create a BI element within the LoadSpring platform, but that is not where we want to focus our efforts. We've done that in the past. So those of you who know us know that we have the Insight tool where we've integrated cost information as well as schedule information to be able to help customers generate an S-curve. And so that's something that's commercially available today. Our preference is to continue to build out this filtration Project Intel solution, and then give you access to all that clean data, and for you to then pick whatever tool of choice for BI it is, whether it's Power BI, Tableau, Qlik, Sisense, and for you to determine which BI solution you're going to use. We don't want to get into competing with different BI solutions. We've done that in the past. Not to compete with them, to only provide customers with quick, clean access to data. But our goal is not to become another Power BI or Tableau. It's to give you access to all that clean data.
Got it. Dean, this next question I think is going to test your elevator pitch. Can you talk about what LoadSpring is and how it works?
So LoadSpring, there's really 4 tiers to our business. One is we provide infrastructure. We're the best in class hosting company of all client-server web-based apps for the project world globally. One. And how do we do that? We provide the infrastructure. We provide security. We also can provide the apps through our different partner relationships. And then we have the managed services where we maintain all those apps. We provide upgrades, patches, performance management of all of those apps. And on top of all of that, and this is what our focus has been today, we deliver the data analytics through the engines through the Project Intel engine that we discussed today. So there is no other organization in the world that gives you infrastructure, the security, the managed services, and then the Project Intel or the analytics, the advanced analytics capability, and owns that holistically for all project-based applications. That's what we do.
Thank you. Well put.
That was for. I wanted to do it in 2 levels, but you really don't need an elevator for only 2 levels. You could use a stairs. So that was probably 3 or 4 levels.
Well done. Well done. And that appears to be the last of the questions that we've gotten from our viewers. I would like to thank you, Dean and Rashaad, for a great presentation, as well as our sponsor, LoadSpring Solutions. If our viewers have any additional questions or comments, please don't hesitate to click the Email Us button on their console. We'll share them with Dean and Rashaad so they can respond to you directly. I'd like to remind you that we'd love your feedback, so please take a few moments to complete our webinar survey at the end of the presentation. ENR is hosting our Future Tech Conference from June 9th through the 11th. If you're interested in registering, there's a 20% discount link in the resources section of your screen, so please feel free to register today. Please visit enr.com/webinars for the archive of this presentation to share with your colleagues, as well as information about our upcoming events. Make sure to tune back in for our next webinar, Platform Integration for Engineers, Contractors, and Owners, which will air June 15th at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We hope that today's presentation was a good investment of your time. Thank you for joining us and have a great day.